Welcome back. I'm going to start this week with a scenario that sounds straightforward but contains a trap. Imagine you are a teacher researcher and you want to know which type of feedback works best for student learning. You design a simple study. You take 60 undergraduates and randomly assign 20 to get written feedback on their assignments, 20 to get verbal feedback in office hours, and 20 to get no feedback as a control group. After a semester, you measure their final exam performance. The results are interesting. The written feedback group averaged 78%. Verbal feedback averaged 74%. No feedback averaged 71%. There's a pattern. It looks like feedback helps and written feedback helps the most. Now here's the question. How do you test whether these differences are statistically significant? And the obvious answer is probably run a t-test comparing written to verbal, another t-test comparing written to control, and another comparing verbal to control. 3 t-tests, right? Done. Except no. That trap I mentioned, this is it. And I want you to understand why before we talk about the solution. Let me explain why running multiple t-tests is dangerous. When you run a single t-test at alpha equals 0.05, you accept a 5% risk of a false positive. That's your type 1 error rate for a single test. But once you run multiple tests, you're now dealing with a family-wise error rate, the probability of getting at least one false positive across your whole family of tests. And that number is much higher than 5%. Let's do the math. The probability of not getting a false positive in one test is 0.95. If your tests are independent, the probability of not getting a false positive in any of the 3 tests is 0.95 to the power of 3. That's 0.86, which means the probability that you do get at least one false positive is 1 minus 0.86, which is 0.14. 14%. Note that this calculation assumes that the 3 tests are fully independent, which they rarely are when they all share the same data. In practice, the inflation is somewhat lower, but it is still real and still substantial. The core problem remains. 14%, not 5%. You've more than doubled your false positive rate just by running 3 tests. Now imagine you have 5 groups, not 3. How many pairwise t-tests is that? Well, 5 choose 2, which is 10 comparisons. The probability of at least one false positive with 10 tests? 1 minus 0.95 to the 10th power. That's almost 40%. Your false positive rate has exploded. This is called the multiple comparisons problem, and it's a real and serious threat to the validity of your conclusions. Now, one solution would be to correct your alpha. You could use what's called a Bonferroni correction. You divide your original alpha by the number of tests. With 3 groups, that would be 0.05 divided by 3, which is an alpha 0.017. You'd only reject if p is less than 0.017. That protects you against false positives. But here's the problem with that approach. As you correct more and more, you lose statistical power. You become less able to detect real effects. By the time you've made your test conservative enough, you might not find anything at all, even if something is really there. So what you need is a statistical test that can compare all your groups simultaneously in a single test. And that test is called ANOVA, which stands for Analysis of Variance. And that's what we're talking about today. Let me introduce the core idea behind ANOVA, and it's about splitting up variance. Here's the conceptual foundation. Imagine you've collected all your data, all 60 exam scores from all 3 groups. You dump them together in one big pile. Those scores vary. Some students did really well, some did poorly, some were in the middle. That variation is your total variance. Now here's the key insight. That total variance can be split into two parts. First, there's variance between groups. This is the variation that comes from the group means being different from each other. The written feedback group averaged 78. The no feedback group averaged 71. There's a 7-point difference between those means. That difference contributes to the overall variance. Some of the spread in your data is because people are in different groups. Second, there is variance within groups. This is the variation among people in the same group. Within the written feedback group, students didn't all score 78. Some scored 85, some scored 72, some scored 81. That spread within each group is part of the total variance too. And here's the beautiful part. Total variance equals between group variance plus within group variance. The equation is simple, but the logic is profound. Why does this matter? Because if your treatment actually works, the between group variance should be large. Your groups should be really different from each other. The treatment creates a big gap between them. At the same time, if there's a lot of noise in your study, if people in the same group are wildly different from each other, then the within group variance is large. That noise obscures the signal. ANOVA is fundamentally a signal-to-noise ratio. It compares the variance between groups, the signal that your treatment created, to the variance within the groups, the noise. This ratio is called the F ratio. The F ratio is calculated like this. You take the between group variance and divide it by the within group variance. F equals between divided by within. Now, what does that ratio tell you? If there's no real difference between your groups, if the null hypothesis is true, then you'd expect the between group variance and the within group variance to be roughly the same size. After all, they're both just noise. The groups aren't actually different, so F should be close to 1. Around 1, sometimes a bit higher, sometimes a bit lower by chance. But if your treatment actually works, the between group variance gets bigger. The groups really are different. At the same time, the within group variance stays relatively constant. People within groups are still noisy, but now there's a big signal on top of that noise. So F becomes large. F might be 2, 3, 5, 10, much bigger than 1. ANOVA tests whether your F is significantly different from 1. Your statistical software calculates the F ratio and then compares it to a theoretical F distribution that would occur by chance if the null hypothesis were true. If your F is way out in the tail of that distribution, you get a small p-value. You reject the null hypothesis. Let me be precise about what ANOVA does and does not tell you. A significant ANOVA tells you that at least one group differs from at least one other group. That's the one canonical statement. At least one group differs. What it does not tell you is which specific groups differ. You might have written feedback different from control, or written feedback different from verbal, or maybe all three groups are different from each other. ANOVA doesn't say. It only tells you that your groups are not all the same. And that's why we need a second step. After you get a significant ANOVA, you do what are called post-hoc tests. These are follow-up comparisons that tell you which specific pairs of groups differ while still controlling for multiple comparisons. The most common are Tukey's HSD and the Bonferroni correction. Tukey's is generally preferred because it's less conservative and gives better power. Let me walk you through what ANOVA looks like when you actually do it. In Jamovi, you'd go to the ANOVA menu. You'd specify your outcome variable, like the exam score, and your grouping variable, the feedback type. And then Jamovi calculates. The output gives you a table. It shows F, the degrees of freedom in parentheses, and the p-value. For example, F257 equals 6.3, p equals 0.003. That's the result you'd report. The groups differ significantly. At least one group differs from at least one other. Then you'd run post-hoc tests to find out which groups specifically differ. We'll talk about effect size, how to measure the magnitude of your ANOVA result, in the next lecture. For now, know that a significant p-value tells you that the groups differ. It doesn't tell you by how much. You'll need an effect size measure to answer that, and we'll get there. Let me synthesize this before we move on. You have multiple groups. You want to know if they're different. You can't run multiple t-tests because the family-wise error rate skyrockets. Instead, you run one ANOVA that tests all groups simultaneously. ANOVA partitions total variance into between group variance and within group variance. The between group variance is the signal. The within group variance is the noise. ANOVA tests whether the signal is significantly larger than the noise by calculating an F ratio. A significant F tells you at least one group differs from at least one other group, but not which pairs. That's why you follow up with post-hoc tests like Tukey's HSD. This is the logic of ANOVA. It extends everything you learned about t-tests, hypothesis testing, p-values, to the case where you have more than two groups. Here's your quick check. An ANOVA returns F brackets 257 equals 6.3, P equals 0.003. What does this tell us? Think about it for a moment. Here's the answer. It tells us that at least one group mean differs significantly from at least one other group mean. The p-value is less than 0.05, so we reject the null hypothesis that all the groups are equal. What it does not tell us is which specific groups differ. We'd need to run post-hoc tests to figure that out. And we don't know yet whether the effect is large or small. We'll need an effect size measure for that, which is coming up in the next video. ANOVA is a screening test. It tells you whether you have a signal. Post-hoc tests tell you where the signal is. Effect size tells you how big it is. In this lecture, we asked, are the groups different? The answer was yes, and here's the test that tells you so. In the next video, we asked the harder question, does that difference actually mean anything? We'll start with effect size. How do you measure the magnitude of a group difference in ANOVA? And then we step back further and ask about validity. Is it a real effect or a statistical artifact? Does it generalize beyond your sample? And crucially, does the study design actually support a causal interpretation? These questions take us into research design, internal validity, external validity, and the threats that can undermine your conclusions even when the statistics look great. ANOVA is a powerful tool for testing differences among groups, but a powerful statistical test on a poorly designed study is still just a poorly designed study. See you in the next video. Bye.